Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ask the Expert webinar, SAS Customer Intelligence 360 Tips and Tricks. Quick wins, shortcuts, and hidden features every marketer should know. My name is Thiago de Souza, and I will serve as your moderator for today's event. Now, I would like to take a moment to introduce our presenters. We have Adolf von Moltke, a Principal Product Manager, Sam Pata, a Senior Product Manager, and Mark Corey, a Senior Product Manager as well. Please take it away.
All right. As I said, I'm going to kick us off in a few seconds, talking about segmentation and audiences. I will hand over to Sam, who's going to talk about the email side of the solution, lots of exciting developments in that space. And then Mark will round us out with talk about our journey orchestration capabilities, which is growing significantly as we move forward. So looking forward to that. So I'm going to start us off and talk a little bit about segmentation and audiences. So in my session or section, I'm going to give you a little bit of info around general shortcuts, things that is across the tool really. And then I'm going to dive into some segment map, usability and tips and tricks pieces. And then I'll end my section with talking a little bit about audiences and some of the AI assistance features we have in audiences. And for today, I'm going to be really brave, and I'm going to do my whole section as a live demo. So let me get that going. So hopefully my screen share is coming through. Fantastic. So I'm going to start us off just with the homepage of CI360, which is what you will see when you log into the tool, and it takes you to the homepage. The first thing I wanted to talk about is something that is not necessarily immediately visible when you use the tool. Almost all the way through the tool in various listing pages and in some of the tasks, etc., you always have this grid listing view where you've got things like a name or a code, etc. What might not be immediately obvious when you look at this grid is that you can actually copy some of the text that's in this grid fairly easily. So for example, if I click on the white space next to the name for the applied for loan email task, when I click on that and I hit Control-C on my keyboard, you'll see a quick animation that frames the name of the cell that I just clicked in, the name of the cell. And what that does is it actually copies that cell contents into your clipboard, and you can then paste that out into another application. And this is quite useful for people that need to keep external systems in sync with what's happening in our tool. And the same goes for other cells in this listing grid. So for example, the task code, which is often something we need to copy. Again, if I click in that cell and I hit Control-C on my keyboard, there's a brief animation that frames the cell, and that means it's copied, and I can then paste that out. And this works for any of the text fields, but if I scroll over to, for example, something like a date field, like the date this object was last modified, again, if I click in that cell, I hit Control-C, a brief animation appears, and again, that value is copied, and I can paste it into a third-party application. So that's just a little quick tip for how to interact with the grids. What I want to do now is I want to switch over to our segments view. Now, when you're in the segments view, something that is fairly visible to everyone is the filter at the top. And the filter in here is a context-sensitive one. So as I type in the filter, it will start to limit the objects that's shown on the right-hand side. Something that might not be that obvious is that there are two options here at the top in the folder pane. The first one, which is highlighted currently, is a button that says only show me the objects that exist in the folder that's currently selected. So if I undo my filter at the top, I have a whole heap of objects of segment maps that's sitting in my segments root folder. If I go into some of the subfolders, there'll be a different set in there, and this filter will now only show me the objects that exist within that folder. So if I go back to the top one, and I switch to my other view, it shows me all the objects that sit in that folder and all its subfolders. So for example, if I click on Analyst, which before had nothing in it, if I do the second view, it shows me all of the segment maps that sit in all of the subsections within that folder. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is it helps with searching. So for today's demo, I created some segment maps. And if I search for that at the top level, I cannot necessarily see them if I'm only looking within that specific folder. So if I switch to that view, I won't see those segment maps. But if I switch to the folder and subfolders view, then they'll come up. So I'm just going to do one more additional filter in there at the dash. And there is my segment map, the demo segment map for today's session. Now, the second thing I wanted to mention is I can open, as you know, the segment map simply by clicking on the name, and that will open the map in full screen mode. But what you can also do is you can hit the down arrow. If your segment map has segments in it, it will give you the list of all the segments in the map. And if you click on the segment, it actually takes you directly to that segment on the map. So if you work with very large segment maps with many tens or hundreds of nodes, that could be an easy, quick way to jump straight to a segment on your diagram. And this takes me to the first tip for using segment maps. Now, for those of us who have built large segment maps in the past, one of the things that you might struggle with is scrolling through the segment map. So if you're in your zoomed in view, the one way to scroll through your map is to use the scroll bars on the side. However, there's actually a pan option in the overflow menu, and you can use that in one of two ways. You can either hit or hold the X on your keyboard, and by holding that X, you can then drag the segment map around, or you can activate the pan mode, which is like holding the X in permanently, and you can then drag your segment map around without needing to do anything else. Just remember to turn it off again, otherwise you can't do things like drag a lasso around nodes. But that's something that I've found very, very useful when dealing with large segment maps and navigating around. The second thing that is now possible, if I zoom out and get my whole segment map into view, is up to now, segment nodes or nodes on the segment map, you could move around in virtually any position that's out there. However, for someone who's a little bit compulsive in getting their segment maps neatly lined up, this has always been a pain because I end up with nodes that's not exactly in the right position on screen. So we now do have a snap to grid option. So if I turn that on and I go and drag or select a bunch of nodes, the moment you use them or move them around, they'll snap to the grid behind the scenes. So I can now go and line up my nodes nice and neat and make sure that my segment map looks exactly the way I want it to. And that snap to grid option is something that will be remembered for this segment map once you save the segment map. The next thing I wanted to highlight, again, if you're zoomed into a fairly large map, just as we could jump to the segment node straight from the segment listing page, you can find those segments in one of two ways. The first one is to right-click on your segment map and use the Find Node option. Within that option, you will get a list of all the nodes in your diagram, and of course, this list might be tens or hundreds of nodes in length. Again, you can use the same filtering criteria by typing in, and the list will filter on as you type. You can also use the filter function, which gives you a list of all the filter facets available to filter this list on. So you can filter on type of node, or if you scroll down, you can filter on whether a node has been marked as a segment. So if I say yes, I will immediately get my 3 nodes on my diagram that has been marked as a segment. The other way of doing this is something that a lot of folk forget about, which is the segments view on the left side of the segment map. So if I click on that, that will immediately highlight all of the segment nodes within my segment map. And if I click on them, it will jump straight to them. So again, this is an easy way to very quickly find your the most important nodes on your diagram, which are the segment nodes, if your diagram is large. So the last thing I want to do in the segment map area, I'll center my segment map so we get that view nice and center. This is, again, something that might not be immediately visible to everyone, but if you have a large segment map or you are running a number of nodes in your segment map, in the pop-up menu, there's an option that you can use to see what the progress is of the nodes that you've selected to run. Now, my segment map is not particularly large. It only has a small number of nodes in there. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-K to bring that up. So to show you what that looks like, I'm going to use Control-A on my keyboard to select all my nodes. Then I'm going to use the Update Counts button. And as soon as that goes, I'm going to bring up the progress window. That progress bar shows me how my selected nodes are running, what the progress is. And this one is fairly quick. Only takes a few seconds to go to 100%. But at the bottom of this, you can see a table that tells you the sequence in which the nodes were run and how long they took, and obviously whether they were successful or not. So if there's a failure, you can see that straight away. This is a really useful view if you are running large numbers of nodes or a large segment map, and you're finding that there's a specific place in the segment map that's taking really long to run. This is a very easy way to see which node, which place in the segment map is the culprit for making things run slowly. So those are the things I wanted to show within the segmentation area of the tool. The last thing I want to round out with is within audiences. So audiences is a slightly different way to do targeting. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but it is the gateway into customer journeys, which Mark will talk about in a few minutes' time. What I wanted to show was the ability to build an audience. There's one of two ways you can do this. When you've picked the source that you want to build your audience on, you can simply drag your attributes into the criteria section, and you can start filling in the various options for what you want to filter your source on. The other way is to make use of our Gen AI assistant. So I have a prompt that I wrote, which is really just an English language statement for the customers that I want to select in my audience. So I've said, find me the English-speaking customers living in the southern United States. So I weren't very specific about where they live. We need to have marketing permission for them to send them some mail. They need to be homeowners, full-time employed. They need to have worked for a certain number of years, have a specific salary, and I'd like them to live within a certain distance of my shops. So I've written this in very vague and fairly vague terms. And if I use our AI assistant, this will now look at my data source to try and figure out which columns in my source actually map up to my language statement, my prompt that I wrote. It has a look at what sort of values those are, and it goes and generates the criteria for what I wrote at the top. So you can see that I said customers should live in the southern United States, and it went and actually picked the 16 or 17 states based on the fact that in my source, the states are represented by their 2-character codes. You can see there it filled in things like English as the spoken language, and it worked out that to send someone a letter in the mail, the OK to contact one has a flag of 1 rather than yes or no. It isn't always perfect, so instead of the word full-time for employment status, I know that that is the character F. So I have the opportunity to go and change that before any of this runs. I can add to this, I can add more criteria, I can remove some of them if I don't specifically want it in there. So for example, if I want to remove the owner option, homeowner option, I can do so before I kick this into action. So this is basically what I wanted to show, some easy assistance to help you build your audiences that you can then activate through the channels like Sam's going to talk about, and orchestrate them through the customer journeys. So that will be the end of my my session. So I'm going to go back to the slides. And I am going to hand over to Sam. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adolf. That was really useful going through all of that. I think sometimes you forget the shortcuts that are available, right? So hi everyone again. I'm going to be taking you through best practices for using the email editors that we have in CI360 email. A lot of you on the call will know today's editors, and I'll advance in the slides in a moment, just give you a bit of context. We have Layout Manager today, which is a drag and drop facility, and we have HTML editing, which allows people to go in, copy and paste their HTML from an external source possibly, or handcraft it within that editor, and use CI360 for a vehicle for sending their emails. We will be introducing a new email designer, hence this section. And I'm going to use this not to delve into each editor, because we do have another session in March, which I will plug in at the end of my session and give you details on that. But instead, in terms of how to tackle your email tasks in CI360, knowing that there are multiple editors available for use to do what's right and correct for your organization. So just as a familiarity, today we have two editors, but in this screenshot you will see that I've included the third editor, the email designer. You access these when you open a new email task or an existing email task, and then in the content area selecting add content or edit content if you already have content in there. And then from the right hand side pane you have a slide out which shows the editors that are available. All of our existing customers will get access to the new email designer, and I'll talk about timings as we go through this presentation, but this is where you access each of those. So going into the layout manager, this is, like I said, the drag and drop elements on the left-hand side. Those of you who use this will be very familiar with it. When you click an element in the center of the screen, then the formatting options available for the editor are available on the right. And it has its limitations, right? So we as a team, as a company, have recognized that there are those limitations, and hence why we wanted to introduce an integration for a tool. And I'll tell you, it is Stripo that we have actually done an integration within CI360. Stripo are a vendor who specialize in formatting and constantly looking at the rendering of these elements in the different email clients, because as we all know, it is a constant moving target. What will work one day won't work another week or a month from now. So it is something that you constantly need to look after. So we wanted to be conscious that we are recognizing those gaps and addressing them in a positive way. So this is a layout manager, generally UI focused, those who don't really want to be touching any HTML or CSS. Then we have our HTML code editor. Like I said earlier, that you can either handcraft your HTML code in here, or a lot of customers who use this method do actually copy and paste it from an external source that they're hosting their HTML in, and then paste it in here. Then they can use the preview function, the responsive previews, and they can use CI360 as a vehicle for sending their emails. So what you will see is when you click on the new email designer, this is a screenshot of what you see in a blank screen. If you have existing content, that will appear within the center of this. Very much similar to the layout manager in the layout of this, in that you have your elements on the left-hand side. You can select the elements in the center, and then whatever is selected in the center in your content, the associated formatting options appear on the right-hand side. Now, this is meant to look different, right? Yes, we have added some elements of CI360 into this, but you'll see top left there is responsive previews, configure link tracking. We've got our OK and save, OK and cancel buttons, bottom right. In the top right there, you'll see save task and the various display functions you can have for mobile and desktop. And this really is a huge step up from what customers have available now. We do have this available on test tenants for specific customers. If you are interested in getting early access to this, then please do let us know and we can arrange for that. Because really, before we put this out onto all test tenants and eventually all onto production tenants within the Q1 part of this year, we want to make sure that people can go in and have a try and see what this is all about. There is quite a lot of settings, I will warn you. It can appear overwhelming, but this is why we're going to be having another session, which I'll mention who's going to be covering that in March. But so those are the 3 editors that you will see when this goes live. And we have a lot of questions around not how do I format this in the new email designer, but more questions around will it affect my existing email tasks and several other questions that come on board. So I wanted to use this session as a kind of tips as to best practices going into this when this does become available within your UI, that you do actually have a bit of a toolkit as to how you're going to tackle your email task going forward. So got a bunch of questions here. I have got answers on them, so when you download these slides, you will have those for reference as well. So does a new email designer affect existing tasks? No, it doesn't. If you create something in Layout Manager, you can completely ignore new email designer if you want, and you can just carry on using Layout Manager. It is there as an option to use even when it becomes available in the production environment. We do recommend to open your email task in especially your content in the originating editor. So if I create it in Layout Manager, open it in Layout Manager, similarly with HTML, or you can create a new one in the email designer. Now, what would happen if I opened an email that I created in Layout Manager and I opened it using the new email designer? It wouldn't break. It would render. However, because it is not recognized as originating from that designer, all of the elements won't be available to you to edit that content. You'll be able to add to the content if you wish to, but it is better to really kind of think of it as starting from scratch in the editor of choice. Do users need to create new email tasks, or can they transfer existing emails into the new email designer? We would recommend to create new email tasks. There is no direct migration tool that's going to be available out the gate when this goes into production. However, we are working on something that will help our customers take their content from their current email tasks, whether it be in Layout Manager or HTML editor, and then port them across, so therefore you can start using the new email designer, not from scratch, but at least at a level where you've got content in there. But like I said, we're not going to have that available out the gate when this goes into production, but we would recommend to use the originating editor and then create new email tasks as you start to use the new email designer. Can users export HTML from an email created using the new email designer and then import into the current HTML editor? Yes, by all means. It is just HTML and CSS, and so the HTML generated from the new email designer, you can open it up in the editor and edit at your heart's content. Just like if you were to export something from Layout Manager into the HTML editor, there will be CSS classes and certain code there which has originated from Layout Manager. Similarly, the same will happen with the new email designer, in that you will probably see classes which are associated with the Stripo editor, but you'll be able to see those in HTML and edit them accordingly. Can the whole email be saved as a template? Yes, just as you can save your email as a template today, and you can bring in that template to use as a basis for creating an email. You can do exactly the same with this new editor. There are the difference between, I would say, the new email designer and besides all of the functionality is that in today's Layout Manager HTML editors, when you save a template, you save it as one file. So it's one HTML file. And with the new email designer, there are two files. There's HTML and there's CSS. So it is separated. However, when you load in your files from a template into the new email designer, it actually creates one file and it inlines your CSS automatically when it loads into that new email designer. So that's a nice thing, but we have catered for the fact that when you want to load in a template, whether you're selecting one file or two files, we've taken care of that in the user interface to make sure that you don't hit any hurdles. Like I said, there's a slide here with all of those answers on, so you can easily go back for reference. Got a couple more questions here. So will it be possible to tell which editor was used to create an email? So initially we didn't have an indicator. So when you go into an email task on the right hand side and the pane comes out from the right, it was that the assumption that obviously the person editing the email would be the person who's probably created it and therefore know which email editor they have used. However, talking to different customers and internally, we're actually going to be putting an indicator on which editor has been used for a particular email task, particularly also that the person editing it may be a different person compared to who created the email. So rather than trying to guess and go into each one of 3 email editors, you'll be able to just pick the one that's been highlighted. Can users see both CSS and HTML for this email in the code editor? So traditionally in today's Layout Manager, if you want to see the associated code, you have to flip to the HTML view and then you get a pop-up dialog saying, are you sure you want to do this? You know, you can't go back. The beauty of the new email designer is that you can actually simultaneously use the drag and drop facility, as well as you can see the HTML and the default and the custom CSS code associated with that. There is a button in the UI, it's available on the top right, and it allows you, for those who are familiar with developer tools, it appears as a horizontal bar along the bottom of the screen, and so you can simultaneously use code as well as drag and drop. And it is a lovely thing to see because I know many people will stick to drag and drop because they're more happier with that. But I think that, you know, being able to see the code and what it's doing, if people are interested, you don't have to leave the screen in order to see it, knowing that you can't flip back again. Will a list be shared of all the features initially available in the new email designer and not available in the Layout Manager? So we have tried for 99% parity, very conscious that when we're introducing a new tool like this, and we saw from the poll earlier how popular it is, on par with segmentation, obviously, and I'm sure journeys will be overtaking us soon. And, you know, we want to have that parity, and where we have replaced something, we want to make sure that we've replaced it either like for like or actually with more functionality, because that is the whole point in bringing in a new tool, to enable customers to be able to achieve the formats and the layouts that you want to with ease, not have to input code where you want to. So how we plan to do this is that in the documentation, this does lead a little bit onto the next question. In the documentation, there will be specific documentation covering what is different with the new email designer compared to your current editors of Layout Manager and HTML editor. We're not going to be replicating Striper's documentation within this CI360 documentation. That obviously doesn't make sense to do that, but where it makes sense to, we will call out the differences. FAQs such as this, and I have got probably double the amount of questions also available to add to this, but not time in this webinar, but those will be added to the documentation in some kind of format so that you can refer to those. And just those, you know, those how-tos, especially around how to tackle using the editors as we push it into production. There will be a few links available in the documentation, in our documentation to the Stripo website, but and those are to pages that we have been recommended to link to. They do have a lot of videos available on YouTube as well. So I would encourage people to look at those. But like I said, we don't want to be replicating it because this is an evolving platform, and we will constantly be getting updates from Stripo in the back end. We'll be testing those updates before we put them out onto production servers. And as we hear feedback from customers, we will document accordingly. So that is what I wanted to cover. I did say that there will be, here's the answer slide that I referred to. There will be a webinar in March, and Suhas Ranganath will be running that. He will be delving into the actual editor and doing a few use cases, ranging from simple use cases to more complex ones, and that's what I didn't want to do in this session, right? Because I have had a lot of questions where people are wondering how should they tackle their email campaigns as they go into this new era with the new email designer being available. So I would recommend you to register for that and listen to Suhas. He has a great bit of knowledge generally on all HTML and CSS related items. Before I hand over to Mark, just want to cover that once we do go general availability with the new email designer, we will make an announcement where there'll be no new development on the current layout manager, and we will announce that it will be deprecated not the day after. Please don't worry about that. It's not going anywhere, but certainly 12, 18 plus months. We will gauge customer feedback. And so those editors will be available. You can work it just as you do today. But we want you to experience the huge functionality jump that you can have in Stripo with the new email designer integration and what that can do for your email campaigns. And with that, I will hand over to you, Mark, to talk about journeys.
Thanks. And just a quick reminder, there's a Q&A element here. So we've had a couple of questions come in, and we should have some time at the end to address as many as possible. So if you have thought of any questions from what Adolf and Sam have shared, or what I'm going to share, or other things in CI360, feel free to drop that in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the last few minutes of the session. So with that, I'm going to start rolling into the journey element here. And so we've talked about segments, and we talked about, there's many possible data sources for audiences, including segmentation, but it can come from cloud sources like Snowflake and et cetera, or APIs. And we've talked about email, which is one of many channel destinations, as you can see in this slide on the right. And while you can connect segments and audiences directly to destinations, the CI360 journey orchestration features allow you to coordinate and automate campaigns with multiple touch points. And this may take the form of an onboarding campaign, or a multi-touch, multi-channel product promotion, or reminders leading up to an event, or maybe an abandoned shopping cart scenario, things along those lines. That's where the journey capability can allow you to just amp up your campaign orchestration and automation. So to support a variety of use cases, we offer two different variations or flavors of journeys, scheduled journeys and real-time journeys. And the two questions that kind of come up right out of the gate that I'm going to address first are, what's the difference between real-time journeys and scheduled journeys? And when should I use one versus the other one? So real-time journeys, they're designed to orchestrate what we call an always-on multi-channel experience for both known and anonymous customers. Your real-time journey will start with an event, like a form submission, or maybe somebody triggered a purchase event, or maybe there was some mobile or web behavior in your apps. Contacts would then enter their journey based on an individual basis when that behavior is detected. If you've been using CI360 for a long time, you may be familiar with the feature we used to call Activities. So Activities was rebranded in May of last year as Real-Time Journeys with a modernized canvas, and the new name helps differentiate it from Scheduled Journeys. So Scheduled Journeys was also introduced back in May last year. This is a brand new feature, and it was designed from the ground up to orchestrate schedule-driven multi-channel experiences for your known customers. So it doesn't work well with anonymous. And on that note, the scheduled journeys start with an audience, and your audience could be millions of customers, or it could be just one customer. So you pick the size. And there's a lot of similarities between both real-time and scheduled journeys, but there's several key differences. So let's break some of those down. I just noted from a targeting perspective, again, real-time journeys is going to be known or anonymous, scheduled unknown only, because real-time can trigger off an event. An event could be associated with an anonymous person. Scheduled journeys start with that audience. That is an important point. From a touch point perspective, you can drop any of the triggered tasks into a real-time journey. On the scheduled side, we support the bulk tasks since it's all schedule oriented. And currently it supports email, push notification, SMS, which is a fairly new capability in CI360, custom tasks, and ad tasks like Google, LinkedIn, Snapchat, etc. In the future, we'll be supporting direct and looking at mobile and web spots. From a personalization perspective, real-time journeys is a little bit limited. Basically, you can personalize off of event attributes that are and some of the data you've uploaded into the cloud, but you're limited to some of those capabilities. But on the scheduled side, you can use any audience attribute or any event, virtually any event in the system. It doesn't have to be an event that was already used or referenced in the journey. It's one of the big key differences. So more flexibility and power on scheduled journeys for personalization. And then from a scheduling perspective, you'll specify when your real-time journey is active, but once it's active, it's always on. It's listening for people that should enter the journey. For scheduled journeys, they operate on prescribed timing. So you'll specify that I want to load the people from my audience into the journey maybe on the first of the month, or maybe every weekday at 9 a.m., or maybe every 4 hours on Wednesday. You'll specify the specific times in which a new audience load we get pulled into the journey. We introduced drop conditions in scheduled journeys. We don't have this capability in real-time journeys, but this is a way for you to indicate somebody should be removed from the journey. So they should exit out at any point in time. So it could be, the most common scenario would be a opt-out or do not contact type of indicator, or it could be that they've made a purchase and they no longer need to be in the journey. So they can exit from the journey and will not receive any downstream communication, and that may make them eligible for another campaign. In real-time journeys, kind of leaned into getting the insights from the tasks that are used in the journey, but we totally went and went all in on providing a robust set of insights, and I'm going to hopefully give you a quick snippet of that in scheduled journeys. So I love the insights that we've got there. We've got more planned coming. And editing, it's fairly flexible on real time, but right now it's a little limited because you've got more of these kind of capabilities in scheduled journeys. Some of the editing of a live journey is limited. Okay, with that, let me get in and share the screen. And from the poll early on, we did not have a lot of people that have at least used journeys. So this will be a good intro. So hopefully my screen is sharing. Okay. All right, so I'm just I'm in the scheduled journey listing page. I'm gonna go through this kind of quick, but hit a few key areas. There's a little tour that comes up if you haven't used it before. Oh, and the demo demons are getting me. The images aren't loading. Let me just hit reload real quick. Sorry about that. let me go back to try this one more time. Sorry, it's working an hour ago. All right. If this doesn't go, we'll try the other tab. All right, now the images are there. We're in a pre-production environment, so we get some of the latest and greatest features in here. So a scheduled journey is what I'm demoing here. Always starts with an audience. So just kind of double click and going through some of these pretty quickly. I'm just going to pick the big spenders. So this audience has 4,800 people in it. And I'm going to send these guys an email. So drop that in. And then I'm going to make some sort of decision. So we're going to have a split node. So the first thing, you can move the canvas around. The first tip is you can collapse the nodes on the left. On the right rail, there's other controls, and you can collapse those to give yourself a lot more space on the canvas. And they've got zoom in, zoom out controls down here. You can expand these by clicking the icons, or the key tip here that's not so obvious is you can show and hide these panels by right mouse clicking anywhere in the white space on the canvas. So I'll bring that one back and the nodes on the left so you can kind of see the different sort of elements you can add to the canvas. I'm going to pick an email just to have an example here, the holiday promo email. And we want to send some people down a path that clicked the email and some that didn't. So I'm going to plug in my criteria. Let's make it interesting, and we'll also only send this to people that are over 21 or over. Maybe we're selling something fun. The secondary condition is I only want to talk to the people down this path that have clicked on my email. So automatically, one of the simple things here is there's only one email upstream, so it shows you that email, and there's only one primary metric associated with that email click. So it pre-fills all that, and I can give this a name. We'll say clicked on email and greater than 21. Now, the key tip I want to share here is this split is going to be evaluated right after people exit the email node. So there's been no time in this scenario for people to react to the email. The email is completed, emails are sent to the inbox, and then the split node is going to immediately start looking to see who clicked. So you want to add a wait node, and you can drag that in over here, or you can say insert after here some particular wait node, and I'm going to give these guys 8 hours to respond. Boom. So that's the first tip. Make sure if you have a split node that is basing a decision on some sort of engagement upstream, make sure there's some duration of time that passes so people have reaction time to an email or a push notification or whatever is being sent. After this, we'll send these guys maybe down over to maybe we'll give them another email, and maybe we'll send these people over to a Facebook ad, and at the end, I'm going to drop an end node. So this is one difference that we have between real-time journeys and scheduled journeys. In scheduled journeys, we ask that everybody explicitly says when the path is done. That way, it's kind of a safety check. You haven't missed anything. And there's a buffer associated with this too. So the buffer is basically a simple wait node. So by default, we're going to wait 7 days and consider people that go through this path to exit the email after 7 days. So they're going to be held in the journey until either the 7 days are up or some sort of drop condition that I mentioned earlier kicks in. You can change that. So maybe that 7 days makes sense for a Facebook ad, But for an email, you don't want to hold somebody in the journey for 2 days. So I can drop that down, or don't want to hold them for 7 days. I could drop them down to 2 days. And you can also stick a name in here. So this will be the email path, and etc. So why would you want to put a name in here? Well, you can see it here on the screen as well, but it's also going to be in the data you download. So you'll have a data point in the UDM information, which most of you guys download and use, which will indicate what end node somebody left the journey from. So you can easily, in your terminology, understand that somebody was in the email path. And I could give this one a name as well if I wanted to. If you don't give it a name, then it's just the end node, and it's got a unique identifier behind the scenes. You could set a buffer to 0 if you wanted to. That's another tip. You may have a scenario where you don't need to have a wait. So I mentioned the drop conditions, success events. I highly recommend that you plug those in. So when you set up your engagement metrics, you can specify what you want to track. If you don't set this up, then there's no target goal, and the success criteria is they reached the end of the journey, so they didn't drop out. And for many cases, that may be fine and legit. But if you're doing something more interesting, we can track and share more data, which is interesting. So if this was a purchase event, then maybe I want to track revenue, and my revenue goal is maybe $10,000 or euros or whatever your currency is. And in this case, I'm going to not rely on the fact they just completed the journey, but I want to say, did they make a purchase? So here, if you set up events and look for a purchase event that we have in our example. So here's an online purchase. Plug that in. And then you need to say, okay, I wanted to track revenue. So this event has a few attributes associated with it. Which attribute contains the purchase amount? Well, it's not the quantity or the unit price. It's the purchase total. So I can add a couple more if I like. So now I'm tracking how much revenue this journey will earn. The final thing I just wanted to highlight here, I could talk about this all day, is the insights. So let me go back and just give you a quick sample. Here's another one that we set up a while ago. This one had a holdout control group associated with it. I'm going to hide that for sake of simplicity. But on the scheduled journey insights, you've got a summary of all the occurrences. So this one's, we had several examples in here. It ran about 11 different times. And you can see how many people entered each occurrence, how many people dropped, is anybody still active, did they complete, did they convert? So what was my conversion metric or event? And the thing which I like, which gets interesting, is you can look at the flow here. And like before, we have all the zoom in, zoom out controls. So this is going to tell me 11,000 people entered the journey, or 10,999, we round up in the little bubbles. They were sent the email. And then in this wait node, 1,800 dropped. That broke down into 11,001 conversions. So maybe they made a purchase or whatever. And 824 dropped for some other reason. Then we had a split node, and you can see how many people continued down each path. And then you can see how many people hit the end node to carry it all the way through. So that shows me overall how many people have flown through the journey so far. Real time will demonstrate and articulate how many people are currently in the journey. So I've got, in this example, 262 people that are in this wait node right now. So that gives you a little bit of a sample of the insights that we've got here in real-time journeys. Let me stop sharing and take this back and see if we've got, so here, like Sam had, I just kind of summarized a few of the tips here. So if you take the slides back later, you can see that. And there was an example of the insights. All right. Do we have any Q&A?
Yes. With that, we'll move into the Q&A segment of the webinar. All right, now on to our first question here. Will the new email designer support AMP email?
So the new email designer tool does support AMP. It's not going to be available out the gate when we go into production in Q1, but AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, is on the list for enhanced development post-production.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's do another question here. When will the new email designer be available?
Yep, so Q1, so we're approaching as for the end of March. It will be available in production. Just again, if you would like to have that in your test and you don't have it already, if you want to try it out, then do let us know. We can arrange for that. But the plan is before the end of Q1, we'll be in production.
Thank you. Can I change a journey after it's active?
Yeah, I covered this a little bit, but it does come up quite often. Depends on the type of journey. So if it's a real-time journey, it's a little bit different than a scheduled journey. Real-time journeys are all trigger-based, and there's a little more flexibility that comes along with that. So in both scenarios, real-time or scheduled journeys, if you need, let's say you have an email that's in your journey and you want to change an image, fix a link, change a typo, add more content, you can do that. You can edit your email and republish it. So no problem there. So changing content of an existing task in a journey is completely supported. With real-time journeys, you can change the flow of an active journey. In scheduled journeys, currently you cannot change the flow. We've added more capabilities and more control with scheduled journeys, but kind of the trade-off is it's harder to change one on the fly. It breaks down some of the reporting infrastructure and things along those lines. We do have plans to introduce a versioning functionality down the road. So you could say, okay, anybody who enters after this point in time will go on the next version of this. So maybe you add a split node path or something along those lines. But you can change the schedule. You could change some of the drop conditions, things along those lines. So there are several things you can edit. It's just basically the canvas in scheduled journeys is locked once it's live. So keep that in mind. You can sometimes accommodate that by building smaller journeys and linking them together. So a few options. Okay, maybe one more question when we're running out of time.
Sure, yeah, let's do just one more. Someone saying, we have a team of people doing segmentation. What sort of collaboration capabilities are available?
That's a really good question, actually. So we are working on a number of those features at the moment. This is something that we are hoping to launch in the next few weeks, if not the next month or so. We will bring the ability in to add notes to a segment map. So something like a sticky or a post-it note, you'll be able to post on a segment map to add a bit more content for collaboration. You'll also be able to add text or image annotations. So if you want to drop in an image of a product offer or add some additional content in there about what a certain section of the segment map is doing, we'll be adding that in within the next few weeks, hopefully in the next month or so. So we'll announce those within our What's New section on our website, on our community pages. So do look out for that. I'm really excited about bringing that into the tool.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions today, but if we did not get to yours, we will answer all unanswered questions in our follow-up communities post. Thank you, everyone, for your answers, and thanks to all of you for joining us on the audience side. On behalf of myself, Adolf, Mark, and Sam, and all of SAS, we really hope that you enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.